Hello, everyone. I'm AZ Hubbard with Save News. We are back here to bring you what's going on in the news today, what's important, and most importantly, to bring you up to date and how things fit up with the scriptures. So, to begin off with, we're going to have a very special guest today. We're not going to pull our regular news. We're having Callie Mitchell, who is Save News International Correspondent in Jerusalem, Israel. Many of you are wondering what has been going on in Israel. So today you're going to find out. So we're going to discuss what's going on in Israel, and we'll also be discussing the green passport in Israel also. So hold tight. Coming right next is Callie and I. Hold on. Callie,
Hi.
everyone, this is AZ with Save News. Today we have Callie Mitchell, as you know, all our faithful readers. She is our international correspondent from Jerusalem, Israel, and you know so much stuff is going on over there. And even as we record this today, within seconds, the situation could change. So we wanted to reach out to Callie and see exactly what's going on. So how are you today, Callie?
I'm good.
Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful. I see you have the beautiful that last chapter, the fourth child. How you doing, sweetie?
Yeah, this is Yaniv.
You want to introduce your baby?
Yeah, this is Yaniv. He's 18 months old. And Yaniv in Hebrew means he will bear fruit.
All righty. Well, yes, bear fruit, bear fruit. Well, Callie, we know that so much is going on, and I followed you on social media, of course, and we know that there is a lot of things. But by you being in Jerusalem, it might not be as intense as it is in the outlying areas. But you also had to go into shelter last week, correct?
Yes, we did. It was sort of the kickoff rockets for this whole military operation that's happening.
Oh, okay. So you've been doing a series for us. For those that want to follow up with what Callie is doing, you can go to our website, savenews.com. And she has several articles that she's written on what is going on and how it's affecting her, how it's affecting Jerusalem and Israel as a whole. So let's go back a little bit and talk about this. Um, this started happening about a month ago, correct?
Some tension started about a month ago. Some of our Arab neighbors were upset about a property dispute that was taking place, and they began having some rioting and protesting and demonstrating against that in Jerusalem, which was interesting because this is really, the property dispute is really non-governmental. It's really a personal dispute between people who are landowners and have had deeds for a specific property since the 1800s, and have been wanting to collect rent. Let's not touch the screen. I wanted to collect rent from tenants who happen to be Arabs, and because of just the overall geopolitical situation that we have, it became a tense issue. And this was happening during the Feast of Ramadan that the Muslims celebrate. Um, and if you look at global statistics on Ramadan, incidents of terror always increase all over the world, and specifically in Israel. So when Ramadan comes around, we tend to be in a little bit more of a posture of prayer anyway, just for peace and for safety for everyone, because there is kind of an expectation that things could get heated. So things were getting tense, and because of that, look, part of Ramadan is the Muslims are going up to Temple Mount to pray. They go to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And I'll just say too, like, I don't know if everyone knows this, but the Al-Aqsa Mosque is the black dome on Temple Mount. The golden dome is the Dome of the Rock. And most people associate Temple Mount with the Dome of the Rock, but Al-Aqsa Mosque is actually considered the more holy site at Temple Mount for the Muslims. So they go there and they pray, and there are some riots and protesting happening, some stone throwing, and so our police had a presence in the and the Muslim community did not like us having a police presence up there. So that was happening. And then meanwhile, the Palestinian Authority has some internal tensions. They have a situation where their current leader, Mahmoud Abbas, has been in office, I think, for 17 years now, and it's been 13 years since they had, okay? Boom. It's been 13 years since they had an election. So they had declared that they would have an election this year, but Israel did not give them permission to have ballots in East Jerusalem. So Abbas canceled the election. But meanwhile, Hamas in Gaza had been campaigning really hard because they wanted to take more power. And with everything that was going on with Temple Mount, they basically used this to be the more powerful party, to be the party to say, we're fighting for Jerusalem and we're fighting for Temple Mount. So on Jerusalem Day, they decided that they gave Israel an ultimatum, and I wish I had known about this. They said at 6 p.m., if you haven't removed your police presence, we're gonna send rockets into Jerusalem. Or I think they just said we were gonna retaliate. I don't know that they were so specifically about sending rockets to Jerusalem, but they were going to retaliate. And at 6 p.m., sure enough, I think it was maybe like 6:03. We were down in the shelter by 6:05. We'll just say. We heard the sirens, and we have these sirens for Memorial Day and Holocaust Remembrance Day, where a siren will happen and we all stand, and so it was a holiday. So I looked at Abiel. Devin was in bed. He had food poisoning, actually, so he wasn't at the table with us. But
so for those that don't know, Devin is your husband.
Right. So I looked at Abiel and I said, Abiel, do we have a siren on Yom Yerushalayim? And before he could even answer, I was like, no, this is an air raid siren. Everyone run. They're all going down. But the air raid siren is a little bit different in terms of how it sounds too. It's a little bit more layered because we can hear the different sirens in different neighborhoods, and it's much louder. So it was characteristically different than the other ones, but it was just such a surprise. It was not anything. I mean, we had helicopters and airplanes all day long, and we had warnings about tension, and we had changed our plans that day to not be. I have to let him out. To not be in certain places that we typically would go that might be a little higher risk, but it was more concerned about riots. It wasn't. Having rockets come in was the farthest thing from my mind. So it was really a surprise. And that kind of kicked off everything. They sent out another notice saying that there would be more rockets at 9 p.m. for Tel Aviv. And sure enough, right on the money at 9 p.m., they sent in a barrage of rockets into Tel Aviv. And Tel Aviv and Ashdod and Ashkelon and Beersheba and Sderot, of course, have gotten most of the attacks that we've had. We've been very calm and very safe in Jerusalem since then. They haven't sent any rockets our way since that one incident.
Okay. All right. Okay, so they did the rockets, and that was the only time within Jerusalem, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, we live kind of with this knowledge in the back of our minds that something could happen.
Right.
I don't think at this point, like where we are right now today, it's so likely. It seems that they even backed off from Tel Aviv, and it's more Ashdod and Ashkelon and the cities surrounding Gaza that are getting most of the attacks right now. So I think that they've kind of exhausted some of their longer range rockets, and they're not, I think we're pretty much in the clear.
Okay.
We're still trying to live in a position of being ready, but the idea is that we just keep going on with life as much as normal as possible. We don't let them steal away normal.
Okay. And one of the reasons why that they don't shoot rockets inside of Jerusalem is because of the minimum long-range missiles that they have, and plus because of the holiness of the Black Dome. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think obviously, like we're about 100 kilometers away from Gaza, And so to get to Jerusalem, we're also up on a mountain. So to get to Jerusalem, they have to have a longer range missile, and that's going to cost them more money to manufacture. And it's going to be just a bigger operation for them to get it here. And the weapons that they use are not so precise. So for them to send rockets into Jerusalem, it does risk the possibility of harming Temple Mount, which would be just a disaster for them. And also just the way that our city works, we have a lot of Arab neighborhoods kind of intermingled throughout Jewish neighborhoods. I mean, most of the Arab neighborhoods are on the east side of the city, but they're just not precise enough to avoid areas that would be costly for them to hit. So they, by and large, they kind of avoid Jerusalem. But in the last two conflicts that I was in here, both Protective Edge and Pillar of Defense, we had a lot more rockets coming into Jerusalem with less escalation in other areas. So this has just been characteristically different. They've had a very different strategy than what they've done in the past. And that strategy has actually come from Iran. Because the last article I wrote about, I actually wrote about how this is a proxy war with Iran. And I think that's something that's really important for everyone to understand, is that this isn't really a war with the Palestinians. This is a war with Iran. So Iran, they fund Hamas and they fund the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and those are both terror groups in Gaza. And then they also fund Hezbollah, which is up on the Syrian and Lebanese border. So they have terror groups that they're actively funding and backing, both in the north and on the south of Israel. There's multi-fronts with them.
Yes, because I think most people are confused. They think that this is a war against Palestinians and the land rights. Like you said, this is really a conflict with Iran.
Yeah, and it is a conflict with the Palestinians as well, but Iran is backing, they're the financial backers behind everything. And the particular strategy that they're using right now came directly from Iran, because their intelligence did a study on the effectiveness of the Iron Dome, which is our anti-missile system. Is 90% effective at shooting down rockets when they are in air. If we didn't have that, we would have a much greater loss of life, like civilian life in Israel. I mean, it's been miraculous in a sense that we've had this in place to protect the people. So their study showed that they could overwhelm it if they would send barrages of rockets in. So within a time frame of about 5 minutes, they might send 50 to 200. Yeah. And so this is a very different strategy than what they've done in the past, where in the past it's been like every few hours, maybe something would come in, maybe a few would come in. I don't live in the South where they get most of the rockets, so I can't speak to what that experience has been like for them. But in those other two conflicts that I was in, it was like just every few hours we would hear booms from the Iron Dome. But this was like really focused barrages in Tel Aviv and Ashkelon and Ashdod specifically. So it was just it's been a very different intensity and a very different kind of experience. And I guess that, they couldn't send, I'm just assuming, they couldn't send rockets into Jerusalem in that same kind of format because they're just too indiscriminate. So they couldn't implement that same strategy here. But yeah, we've been very safe and very calm so far. So I don't know. It's just, but because they do have a new strategy, I'm a little edgy. I'm a little bit like,
yeah. It's like you don't know what to expect next, because they'll switch up on you in a second.
Yeah, exactly. And I trust Israeli intelligence and the IDF has an idea of what to expect, and they would be notifying us if there was more need to take cover. I trust that they know, but I would like to know.
Yeah, well, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So what are they saying? Is there an end coming near, hopefully, or well, we know there won't be perfect peace until Christ comes, Yeshua comes back. So what do we see happening as far as winding this particular conflict down, or is there a wind down to this?
Yeah, well, Israeli officials have said that we're not going to enter into a ceasefire agreement until we complete the mission. And the mission seems to be that they are wanting to take out the terror tunnels that are running under Gaza. In the last conflict, Hamas had built tunnels that ran from under Gaza into Israel, and several of them even ended up at schools and places where people were living.
Wow.
So they have been working this time to get rid of those tunnels. They got rid of the ones that were under Israel, as far as I understand, and that they actually have put an underground wall around Gaza. So they've built like a concrete wall underground, like several, I think it said last reporter, I think it said dozens of meters underground, so that they cannot tunnel from Gaza into Israel. But they've been doing their tunnels under Gaza. They call it the Metro, and they have their weapons stored there, and they have a lot of their militants are working underneath in these tunnels as well. So Israel actually kind of did a really interesting mission earlier on in the week. I don't know if you guys can hear my baby crying in the background.
Yes, we can, but we know this one thing about it is that we have to understand that you're a mother of 4 beautiful children, and it's early, and husband is at work, and so we're gonna have to press through the baby crying. He'll be okay. I mean, if you need to go check on him, that's one thing, but we, the Save News audience, we totally understand.
So so anyway, the mission though, a few nights ago, the media was releasing reports that there was going to be a ground incursion, and they had actually positioned tanks. You want to come sit with me? They had positioned tanks around Gaza, and it looked like, by all accounts, that there could be a ground incursion. And then we woke up in the morning and found out that there wasn't a ground incursion, but rather they had sent in over 100 fighter pilots to drop bombs and to destroy these terror tunnels underneath Gaza. So it was kind of interesting because they basically used the media to their advantage. They used the media to put out this message that there was going to be a ground incursion when that wasn't the plan. The plan was an airstrike.
Wow.
Yeah, and so they did a lot at that point. I think that was a big turning point for Israel during this particular conflict, and that they were able to get a lot taken care of there. So I think that's been the main mission. Yesterday, we had a big flyover here in Jerusalem. They're working on taking out these terror tunnels.
And also that they had used the media.
Yes, they used the media, that they sent this message out to the media, allowed the media to say these things, and then they did something different. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so they just gave false information. Hopefully the media isn't working with them.
Right.
Yes, okay, good.
Yeah, they've said, our officials have said that they're not going to enter into a ceasefire agreement until they finish the mission. So I don't know, I mean, I'm not a military insider, so I don't know exactly what all of this mission is going to entail, but it does look like the main focus is to take out as many of these tunnels as possible, and to also get rid of Hamas militants and leaders, which is kind of a sad thing to have to talk about, but that's what they're doing.
Yeah, we understand. Even biblically, God had you have to take out some people, but it's unfortunate, too bad we all can't just get along,
Yeah, one day we will.
Yeah, we just be prayerful. We're definitely going to be prayerful for Israel during this time, and it's a very much praying time. Now, Callie, I want to switch topics a little bit to your green passport, because you've doing a series on that. I'm telling you, Callie, you are killing it. Save News, love Callie.
Right.
Callie is killing it. Now, what, here in the States, I think things are a little tensing up because, the green passport, for those that don't know, is validation that you have received the COVID vaccine shot, and that but here in the United States it's sort of tensing up, because never in my life have I had people feel so comfortable with asking you into your personal medical history. You could be in line at the store and people don't know you, and they're like, well, have you had the vaccine? Have you had the vaccine? And it's like, it's really none of your business whether I've had something or not. You know what I'm saying? But over in Jerusalem, Israel, it's a little bit more intense than it is here now. So I want you to sort of break it down, the green passport, and exactly what you all are going through and what you're facing there now.
Yeah, well, right now it's interesting because no one's discussing this. Everything's sort of gone on hold. In fact, I think the FDA issued their emergency use authorization for vaccinating children 12 and up on the same day that this conflict started. And so I was expecting just the media barrage,
Right.
of all the articles, the fear mongering from the media about children getting the virus and passing it to other people and everything. I was expecting just the fear mongering from the propaganda and the media to come up, and then this happened, and it's like no one's talking about it. So that's good news, but they haven't disbanded it. So it's still going on, but this is a very interesting situation here because it's not one where the body of Messiah is unified. There's differences of opinion on what's taking place, and it can get really intense because they're obviously the people who are vaccinated are not feeling the intensity of what's happening in the same way as the people who are electing to decline the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
They're not feeling the tension when our health minister, Yuli Edelstein, comes on and says that the unvaccinated are dangerous. Maybe they read it and they just look over it or whatever. I don't know what their response is, but if you're not vaccinated and you read that, there's a startling kind of sense there, like, you're telling people that I'm dangerous because of a healthcare decision that doesn't even have strong evidence to support it being effective.
Well, we're getting that here. Biden came out day before yesterday and said, first he said, get vaccinated or not, it's your choice. But, he was implying something very serious was going to happen. Then he came out a couple of days ago and he said, in essence, if you do not get vaccinated, then you're going to pay the cost. And I want to know exactly what cost he talking about, because this is America. I mean, whether someone gets the vaccine or not, it's really their choice. And I respect those that decide to get it. I respect those that decide not to get it. Right now, it's my personal business whether I have it or not. I've received the vaccine or not. You're dealing with HIPAA laws and stuff. I mean, people ask you in the street whether you've had the vaccine or not. And really, I don't answer that question. There's certain questions I don't answer. And it's up to them whether or not they're going to be comfortable with me not answering. I believe in social distancing and wearing the mask. And one thing, a study that just came out yesterday said that even those that are vaccinated are still wearing the mask. And when they wear, and they're receiving pushback because they want to know, they want people that's vaccinated to stop wearing the mask. So it's just like a whole lot of confusion. I think this is something that people need to take a step back from and, maybe revisit that, let things sort of cool down a little bit. But I know with the green passport, there's a lot of limitations if a person doesn't have one over in Israel. Is that correct?
Right. So if you're not vaccinated and you do not have the green passport, which is an app on your phone, they also give it in like a paper form for people who, maybe senior adults who don't have smartphones or whatever, or anyone else not having one. But without it, you're not supposed to be able to stay in a hotel or eat inside at a restaurant or go to a gym or pool, although they said that they might be changing those. Also, it has implications for houses of worship. So if a house of worship signs on with the program, they can have a higher occupancy than if they don't. Also, they've had concerts that they've only allowed the vaccinated population in. Sporting events are only for the vaccinated population. So it's been very interesting. We mostly tried to go places where, because there are restaurants, for example, that are boycotting.
Yeah. Because it's going to affect their bottom line. Everybody's not going to get vaccinated. I mean, it is what it is. Right, and we're seeing this sort of the same thing. I think, well, just recently, you all had a major service that for the Messianics, that those that were not vaccinated were not allowed in. And in America, we're seeing like Franklin Graham coming out and other pastors coming out. And one of the things that saying, trying to encourage, Christians, conservative Christians to get vaccinated. Well, a lot of conservative Christians got vaccinated. And one of the things that's being asked is, what is your motive for pushing this now? Before you weren't with it. So is it because people are not going to church and you cannot, you're not getting the offerings that you once received? I don't know. But in Jerusalem, it seems like, in Israel, it seems like it's just so much more advanced.
Yeah, I think it's because of the contract with Pfizer that Bibi signed, because that contract, a lot of it's redacted and we can't read all of it. But for the most part, if you go through and look at it, it's very clear that they wanted a specific number, a specific percentage of the population vaccinated within a specific time frame. So there was a huge push to, I think, meet the terms of the contract. And part of it has been like, before this happened, when they were building up for vaccinating the children, they were saying that we were not going to reach herd immunity until the children were vaccinated too. So I think that was part of it. All these things are happening. We started vaccinating pregnant women here more than a month before they even started clinical trials on pregnant women.
Right.
And we had about, I think, 50% of our population vaccinated before they started doing clinical trials on systemic allergic reactions to the vaccine.
Right.
And to me, it's just illogical.
Regardless, like I said, I respect those that receive the vaccine and I respect those that don't. But it seems mighty strange to me that people are allowed to take a vaccine or any type of medicine without the person having to disclose their medical history to see, within a confined medical environment, to see whether or not there will be adverse effects. A lot of people have suffered from heart attacks, blood clots, strokes, because it does cause clotting. And if someone is susceptible or, have high blood pressure or whatever, people dropping dead, it is happening. And, we're not hearing about it as much. But like I said, if someone don't want to get it, it's their choice. If they want to get it, it's their choice. And I respect both. Again, like I said, I will not be answering that question. So if you see me on the street, anyone that's about Save News, do not ask me, because my answer will be, I'm not answering that question. Right. But Callie, elaborates more, and then we're going to wrap it up, because we can always come back and, see what else is going on over there in Jerusalem.
Yeah. Well, I did want to say too, like, I don't ever want to stand in the way of anyone making a healthcare decision. But the problem here is that we have an emergency use authorized vaccine that's being pushed on people with consequence if you refuse it. And that to me is where it's a problem. It's not fully tested. We don't have medium or long-term studies. We don't even have completed short-term studies. And it's been pushed on this population here in Israel with consequence. Like, at least in the United States, you guys have some laws protecting you when a medical procedure is an emergency use authorized procedure. Here we don't have those same laws protecting us, and it's just gone crazy. But I think one thing that's been interesting about it is to juxtapose Israel's response to COVID and to Israel's response to a military conflict. Just looking at where we are right now, like when we were dealing with COVID, Israel went the way of the nations. It followed basically all the directives from the WHO or wherever it's originating. did all the lockdowns. In fact, we had the most lockdown days of any country in the world.
Right.
At a cumulative 5 months. I was not aware of that until January. I thought other places were a little bit more on par with us, but when I read that, I was like, wow, it did something in my heart, in my spirit. Like I really felt like we were under attack in a certain way. We also were using a PCR test that had the most amplifications. So it was picking up on the virus once it had died. And, you know, we were getting positives that maybe other countries who are using less amplifications were not getting. So our responses have just been very extreme. And I think it's in Israel's nature to be kind of extreme. I like to say Israel likes to be the EST. They like to be the best at everything. So that, in that sense, it's kind of like Israel, but it's unlike Israel to go along with globalist positions. That's unlike Israel. And that's what we have seen in the last year. And it seemed like a very unfamiliar place. Like to go out in the street and for people to seem afraid of each other has been a very strange experience. Because one of my favorite things about Israel is just the family nature of the culture, that people are so welcoming of one another, at least after you get past the prickly side. They embrace each other. I mean, they would give the shirt off their back for their neighbor. Like I've had people do this for me. Like there was a time a man carried my box all the way from the post office in the rain to my bus stop for me. Like he left his place in line at the post office to do this for me. It was a long line. And there's a way that the people here will die for one another, you know. And during the COVID year, that was gone. People seemed very afraid of each other, and it was really sad. That was something that Devin and I both really mourned and grieved, just seeing that change in our neighbors. But, you know, Bibi Netanyahu, who I've loved over the years, he's also very involved in the World Economic Forum. So I'm not sure exactly what his goals have been with everything, but I will say that the responses were very globalist. And when we get into military conflict, we cannot respond in a way that's globalist. We can't go the way of the nations, because the nations would do things like make Jerusalem an international city. You know, it would divide the land. And God's word says in Joel that whoever divides the land will be brought into judgment. You know, Israel has to take a firm stance and be set apart. And so that's what we're seeing now that we're in this conflict. We're seeing like Joe Biden and France and even China are putting pressure, Egypt putting pressure on Israel to have a ceasefire. And I'm all for peace, okay? I'm all for like, not having rockets, but
there's a limit.
Yes, yeah. And Israel has had to make a firm position and say, we're going to complete this mission. We're not going to enter into a ceasefire agreement until we're done. So they have separated out from the nations once again. They haven't gone the way of the international community. They're doing what's in the best interest of the people. And that's Israel. This is the Israel that we know. And so I've really been praying that this would be a time to remind people of this, because we're not a nation that can afford to have the green passport here. We can't afford to divide Israeli citizens into groups based on a healthcare decision. You know, we're a nation that needs to be unified. Even if, I mean, it's diverse. Not everyone has the same opinion. You know, there's a spectrum, but for the most part, when this nation comes under attack, we're a unified people, by and large, right? And we have to be unified. We can't allow these things to come in that are divisive to us. So I've really been praying that this would be something that the Lord would use to open up some eyes, and that he would just remind the people who we are and what we stand for, and that we would disband some of these things that haven't been characteristic of this nation. So that's been my heart in the last few days.
Yeah. You know, that's my prayer also, especially since, you know, when you look at it as a biblical aspect, it's leading down a road that, and we won't get into that today, because we can talk about that for hours. We can talk about that for hours on end. But there's, you know, it's definitely the path to fulfilling the prophetic And so we all must be very clear and watchful. We need to be like watchmen on the wall and, compare what is going on in this world today with the word of God and see, what decisions we really need to make and how we need to govern and how we need to move, because there are things that's happening that you would have to be blind, really. Even a blind person could see it, that we are definitely headed towards the last days. But anyway, like I said, we won't get into that because, Callie, we could, you and I could talk for hours on that, but we won't do this on the show. But anyway, I'm going to, I wanted to wrap this up, but I wanted to see, is there something that I've neglected to ask you that you want to cover? And if so, I'm going to give the floor to you, and then I'll wrap it up.
Well, I would say, without going into the hour-long discussion, it is just on my heart, just to remind everyone that this isn't just a battle for land. It's really, I think it's a war for truth. Very much so. Like God's word, I feel is so clear. I know other people have different opinions on this, but to me, it's so clear that the Lord has established Israel for His purpose, and He's not done with this nation. Yeshua has to return to a Jewish Israel.
Yes.
And the Lord is going to fulfill the promises that He made to the patriarchs, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because He is a God of covenant and keeps His word. Even Ezekiel 36, it talks about how He's going to bring the nation of Israel back into the land of Israel to vindicate the holiness of His name, because He's a God of covenant. He's bringing them back for His name's sake, to show the world that He is holy. So when we stand with Israel, we stand with something that God is doing to prove Himself holy amongst the nations. And what's happening from Hamas, I mean, they're a terrorist organization. This is jihad, like we need to recognize that what Israel's facing is jihad. When they send those rockets, they send it and they issue a prayer. I'm not going to say what they say. You know what they say. You know what to say before they kill someone. That's what they do. This is jihad. And we need to be people who walk in truth. And the Bible tells us that in the end, that Jerusalem will be a stumbling block. So I think this is an area where you all can act as an army of intercessors and an army of teachers. And you all have an important role where you are to make sure to teach truth about Israel. Make sure the millennial generation, Gen Z, make sure these people know what God's word says about Israel. Share it with your neighbors,
Exactly.
And also with that in mind, like the media is going to have an anti-Israel bias, because the media is not, oftentimes it's a tool of propaganda and lies. It's not necessarily a venue for truth. So
that's why we have Save News.
That's right.
That's why God gave us Save News. I'm telling you, not because I run it, but God has put Save News and other organizations, His, Christian organizations, in place on the media mountain, so we can get this word out. And I think God is, it's humbling that He's allowed us to be here at this time. And I thank God for you, Callie, because you've been with me, Save News, for going on 8 years.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, Callie, hug with me. I mean, seriously, she's been very faithful, very loyal writer every month. Make sure you pick up
I love it.
It doesn't seem that long, does it?
It's what?
I said, it doesn't seem that long, does it?
No, it's hard to believe it. I actually started writing for you after the first conflict I went through here.
Right.
That's what brought us together. So yeah. But yeah, it's I kind of feel like it's that column's like my baby.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I love
it. It is. And everybody, please go to savenews.com. Callie has a series of articles. You can always go in the search bar, and if you don't see all of them, and type in Callie's name, and it'll pull up all the articles that she's written. Just come back and follow her and read those articles, get caught up, and we are definitely going to have Callie back to fill us in on what's going on in Israel, and because we definitely need to know. It's not something we need to keep a blind eye out on, because we need to know how the word of God is moving, how prophecy is being fulfilled. And so yeah, but anyway,
you guys all send me questions too. If there's anything that you want to know specifically about this conflict and how it's affecting our family, how it's affecting others,
Right.
more apologetic information about it, like what's going on to cause it, and things about different efforts that the military is doing, let me know, and I'll go after the information.
Yes, just we're going to set up an email. I think I've already set it up a long time ago. Callie@savenews.com. Send it to her, and any questions you have, she'll address it. And I'll put the information in, but we definitely want to make sure that we keep everybody abreast on what's going on, not just here in the United States, but in Israel also. So Callie, again, I really appreciate you coming on. We gotta make this a regular. We bring all the kids in.
We should do this.
We have a kid session.
Just keep praying, and my friend Samantha, she always says she tells her friends in the States who support them, when you think of us, pray for the nation. And yeah, I say that. When you think about our family, please pray for the nation. Please pray for the IDF. What's going on here does need a lot of prayer, and it's effective. There are times during the day when I feel really aware that people are praying. Like I just will have a peace come over me, and I'll be like, okay, I think, I've got some intercessors,
All right.
So yeah, pray. Just
pray.
Be a people of prayer for Israel. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And it's the only city the Bible tells us to pray for specifically. That doesn't mean we don't pray for other cities, but it is kind of a special thing.
Yes.
So pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and just pray.
All right then. All right, we're going to sign off.